Number 10. Drunken shrimps. Shrimps are delicious, and there are a million ways to prepare them. You can barbecue them, cook them in oil with garlic, add them to curries, or do whatever else you want with them, and each recipe is more delicious than the last. But if you go to China, you can try shrimps prepared in a slightly more unusual way. There are lots of versions of drunken shrimps, but as you can probably guess from the name, it usually involves alcohol. To prepare the dish, you start by taking your live shrimps and immersing them in alcohol. Unsurprisingly, shrimps don't appreciate being dunked in booze, so at this point, some of them may launch themselves out of the bowl and across the room, so you'll need to be ready to grab the ones trying to pull a Houdini. Herbs, spices, and other seasonings are often added to the alcohol to give the shrimp some extra flavor, and then, depending on the recipe, the shrimps may then be cooked. But with other versions, the shrimps are served as they are, still alive and wriggling, and you just pick them up with your chopsticks and eat them like that. That's a bit of a bummer for the poor shrimps, but by this point, they're probably so wasted they've got no idea what's going on, so at least there's some small consolation for them there. Number 9. Mukduck. If you have the chance to visit the Inuit or other native Arctic peoples, there's a good chance that at some point you'll be offered some mukduck to try. Although whether you'll be able to stomach it is another question because it's probably not quite like anything you're normally used to eating. So what is it? Well, basically, it's whale skin and blubber, and you usually eat it raw. Okay, so here's the thing. It doesn't actually taste that bad, so if you can forget about what it is that you're actually eating for a moment, you might find you quite enjoy it. Eaten raw, it has an oily texture and a nutty flavor, perhaps most similar to hazelnuts, and sometimes it's eaten with soy sauce, which kinda makes sense because that's a bit like eating sushi. Number 8. Hákarl. Right, so as long as you can forget that you're eating raw whale blubber, mukduck tastes okay. But with Icelandic hákarl, you can't just try to forget what you're eating because the smell and the taste won't let you. Basically, hákarl is fermented shark, usually made with Greenland shark meat, but also sometimes with other similar species. Now, if you just catch a Greenland shark and eat it, you'll get sick because the meat is poisonous. So, what did the ingenious Icelanders do to get around this? Well, traditionally, they dug a pit and buried the shark in it for around 6 to 12 weeks. This causes the meat to ferment, while also reducing the poisonous urea and trimethylamine oxide content, and the heavy stones placed on top of it cause all the juices to ooze out. After leaving it for the allotted amount of time, you go back to where you buried your shark, dig it up, cut it into strips, and hang it up to dry for a few months. Then, when it's ready, you cut off the brown crust that will have formed and tuck into the pale flesh preserved within, possibly with a shot of Brennivin, the local version of aquavit. So, what does it taste like? Well, hákarl is essentially rotten shark meat that is fermented in the shark's own urine, and as such, it has pretty much the flavor you'd expect. It has high ammonia content, so it also tastes a bit like eating a household cleaning product. People who try it for the first time often can't hold it down, and many people consider it the worst thing they've ever put in their mouths. Number 7. Surströmming. But if there's something that rivals hákarl as being the most disgusting food in the world, to non-locals at least, it's Swedish surströmming, and this is a delicacy that can turn even the steeliest of stomachs. To make it, you start with some Baltic herring, known in Swedish as strömming. You then add just enough salt to prevent the herring from rotting, and you leave it for at least 6 months to ferment. Surströmming comes in cans, and since fermentation continues in the cans, causing them to bulge, they're usually opened outside, or even in a bucket of water to prevent the escaping gas from spraying putrid fish juice all over you. Most people who aren't used to the Swedish delicacy immediately feel ill just from the smell, and actually managing to consume some and holding it down is a major achievement. However, Swedes will say that it needs to be prepared properly and isn't supposed to be eaten straight out of the tin. Although, it's hard to see how eating it with a bit of bread, some potatoes, and some chopped onion is going to improve the flavor much. Number 6. Century egg. So, let's leave the Scandinavians and head back to China where you can, if you feel so inclined, sample another delicacy known as century egg. Now, contrary to what the name suggests, these eggs aren't actually 100 years old, but they might as well be judging by the look and taste of them. To make one, you take an egg from a chicken, a duck, or a quail, and cover it in wood ash, calcium oxide, and salt. You then place your eggs in a basket. You can put all your eggs in one basket or use more than one as you see fit. You cover them over and you forget about them for a few months. Then, when they're ready, you crack them open and eat them. Simple as that. By the time they're ready, the egg white will have turned dark brown, and the yolk will now be a lurid dark green color. The flavor is strong, and the smell is pungent, and the texture is similar to jelly. According to one story, the way of making these eggs was discovered when a boy left some duck eggs in the garden of a girl he liked as a way of trying to court her. She didn't find the eggs until much later since they had been buried in an ash pit, and for some reason best known to her, rather than throwing out the foul-looking rotten eggs she just found, she decided to eat them and discovered she quite enjoyed the creamy texture and the unique taste of hydrogen sulfide mixed with ammonia. Number 5. Ballut. Let's stay with eggs for the moment, but let's jump across to the Philippines where one of the many local snacks found there is known as balut. Balut is eggs that are boiled or steamed and then sold as a cheap and nutritious form of street food. You simply buy one off a street vendor, crack the egg open, and eat what you find inside. So, where's the catch? Well, these aren't just normal eggs because these ones have been fertilized and inside each one is a duck embryo that's been left to grow for between 2 and 3 weeks before the egg was cooked. Different people have their own preferences. Some prefer a less developed embryo that's still largely liquid, while some others prefer a more developed embryo that includes soft bones and even a beak because of the chewier texture. In the Philippines, people generally opt for less developed embryos, but balut also exists in other countries in the region, and in Vietnam, for example, people tend to prefer an embryo that is almost fully developed and looks recognizably like an unhatched baby duck. Number 4. Tikkan. The Vietnamese have got plenty of other challenging delicacies for adventurous travelers to sample, and another one is what's known as tikkan, or more simply, blood soup. To make it, you start by drawing the blood from an animal. It's usually a pig or a duck, but it can also be made from goat, goose, chicken, calf, snake, crab, lobster, or blood cockle. You take the fresh blood and mix it with some fish sauce to prevent it from coagulating, and in the meantime, you boil up some other stuff that might include things like duck gizzards, cartilage, liver, and finely chopped pig intestines. You then take some of the broth used to boil the other ingredients and pour it into the blood mixture, which causes it to coagulate. This is then poured into a bowl with the chopped meat and other ingredients before it has a chance to set. The whole thing is then placed in the refrigerator, which keeps the blood coagulated, and you take it out and eat it cold whenever you feel peckish. Of course, eating raw pig or duck blood is not without its health risks, and some people have died from eating this dish. So yeah, it's a local delicacy and it's supposed to bring good fortune. If you're fortunate enough to not get seriously ill from eating it, that is. Number 3. San-nakji. At least with things like blood soup, there's nothing squirming around on your plate to put you off your meal. But that can't be said of the Korean favorite san-nakji, a type of small octopus served raw and doused with sesame oil and toasted sesame seeds. Usually the octopuses involved are cut up before being served, but since octopus tentacles have neurons in them, they continue to move about on your plate even after the octopus itself has died. Diners then simply pick the moving tentacles up with a pair of chopsticks and eat them as they are. The thing is, the tentacles literally have a mind of their own, and the suction cups can actually grab onto your mouth and throat as you try to eat them. Some people have even been choked to death by stubborn octopus tentacles intent on one final act of revenge. Sometimes people eat the whole octopuses too, and these come served simply as plates of whole small octopuses covered in the condiments ready to pick up and bite into. But you have to be quick because otherwise you might see your meal crawling off the table. Number 2. Shiokara. Okay, so you don't want to eat anything that's moving or even still alive. So what about this one then? In Japan, a delicacy you may or may not wish to sample is shiokara, salted fermented fish guts. The guts are combined with malted rice and stored for up to a month, and the resulting mixture is then paired with other pieces of meat to serve. Even many Japanese are not big fans of this snack, so as a tourist there, you probably don't stand much chance with this one. But if you can stomach a portion of this, it's definitely something to be proud of. Number 1. Kasumatsu. And finally to the Italian island of Sardinia where, should the idea appeal to you, you'll have the opportunity to sample Kasumatsu, which in the local Sardinian language means putrid cheese. But even this slightly off-putting name doesn't do it full justice. It starts with a regular piece of pecorino, a well-known and very tasty cheese. However, cheese flies are then allowed to lay their eggs in it, and when their maggots hatch, they begin to eat it. Now at this point, most people would probably see a maggot-infested cheese, write it off and throw it away, but not with Kasumatsu. Nope, because as the maggots eat the cheese, they enhance the fermentation process while breaking down the fats and causing it to become very soft and creamy. However, if the maggots in the cheese die, it means it's been left for too long, so you have to eat it while the maggots are still crawling around inside. Sometimes the cheese is served on bread, and the strong aftertaste can linger for several hours. The cheese maggots don't appreciate being incorporated into a sandwich though, and sometimes they may launch themselves into the air in a last-ditch bid for survival. When they jump like this, they can fly up to 6 inches, so when you take a bite of your cheese and bread, you're best off holding one of your hands over it to stop the maggots jumping onto your face. Sorry, but that's totally gross. I mean, what's wrong with just eating your bread with a bit of laughing cow? So, which ones do you think you could handle? Or which one would you choose if you had to eat at least one? Have you ever actually tried any of these foods yourself? We'd love to hear your thoughts, so please leave us a comment in the section below. And if you think this video rocks, please drop us a like and follow before you leave to help us making more content like this. See you on the next one.